Let's goldfish some bad guys. Morrigan, Twyla, and Balthazar are kind of our premier bad guys. They're a group of 3 friends who just had a really bad time growing up and kind of shaped them the way they are. And so the bad guy's archetype is very much I'm going to bring myself down and then I'm going to bring you down with me sort of archetypal gameplay. They like that their tenacity total is 2 or less. So in this case, 0, 2, and 2. So this would be a tenacity total of 4, which they would not want. All of their effects are turned off and their cards get much weaker. However, once they have a tenacity total of 2, 0, 2, 0, then a lot of their effects become very strong and they really thrive in this kind of gross, low tenacity total area that most decks, and I think most ways that characters and decks want to play, don't really want. So they thrive in that. So what we're going to do is we are going to play some practice turns, a few rounds, maybe to like a deck recycle or a deck recycle and a half, and we're going to see kind of how they're doing, if they really flow, if there are some problem points, if some wording needs a little changes here and there, and if there's any problems. I think a lot of times in these I find that I really need to figure out if some cards are busted or just lacking. So that's what we're going to do. Morrigan, remember all these characters want to have a tenacity total of 2 or less to do their really cool thing. So while we have a tenacity total of 2 or less, Morrigan can consume a card from our hand to play a summon card from our discard pile. Twyla, with a tenacity total of 2 or less, can exhaust an ally song to exhaust any 1 enhancement on the opponent's side. And Balthazar is very unique. He really is one of the characters that we want to kind of be like, well, does bad things, but he's not a bad guy, and he's got this kind of like inner turmoil. So the way that we represent that is by giving him this ability that says printed 3 cost or more cards do not count towards your tenacity total. So he wants to play a lot of 3 cost cards, and he's okay to have them in his tenacity total. It's okay for that to be a little bit higher and for them to be there for him. Once per turn, while our tenacity total is 2 or less, of course, we can deal ourselves a stamina card and then free play 1 3-cost or more card from our discard pile. So very, very powerful stuff. Take a stamina, play a card, put it into our tenacity. It doesn't count towards our effect, and we can keep going from there. So let's get started. I have our deck here. I've got our armory cards in case they come up. I'll bring them out, but I'm going to flow through this pretty quickly. So I'm not going to explain every single card, but I will explain all the relevant details and parts so we can actually play those cards. So who do we want to start with? Well, we want to get 3 costs into our tenacity, and Morrigan has the highest hand side, and Twyla really needs to be set up a little bit before. So Morrigan is our setup here, and I think it makes the most sense intuitively because she has a 7 card hand size. So we're looking at 7. Let's say that we're going to go first. We get a perfect 5 right there. Love that for our stamina, and we're going to flip the top, which is Kneel for me. It's a 0-cost defense card, which is fine. It's in our tenacity, and it's 2 or less, so we're good to go. We'll constantly reference this area because this is our tenacity. Looks like we've got some Champion's House for some attacks. We've got some enhancements, some songs to be able to hurt our opponent and ourselves. We've got a small attack, and we've got some summon cards. So we know we want to get the summons into our discard pile pretty early so we can activate Morrigan's effect and to essentially get like an extra card out of our hand. So what we're going to do is, I think we're going to start by playing Mean. This will ensure we always have a tenacity total of 2 or less because it gives every tenacity card -1 cost. So we're going to play Mean, and we're going to spend 1 Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont to do that. Now we have 1 in our discard pile, so we can activate Morrigan's effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to consume a card from my hand. I'm going to consume one of these Champion's House. Nope, let's consume an Abomination. This thing is huge, so we're going to remove this card from the game, exhaust Morrigan for her ability's cost, and we're going to play Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont. We're going to discard 3 cards from our hand to pay Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont's cost, and then we are going to get a summon in play. Oh, we don't discard them, sorry. This is a summon, so they're going to get attached to Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont. Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont has a passive ability that says every tenacity card gets -1 cost, and as an action we can discard 1 card attached here and deal damage equal to their attack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exhaust this. I'm going to discard a card attached to them and deal, boom, 3 damage, because we can see a tiny little 3 here. That'll change in the future, but 3 damage, boom. Next, we have our Crescendo, which is going to just a 0-cost 3 damage attack thanks to Twyla's kit. I'm going to boom, hit for 3, so we've hit for 3, played a song, and we played a summon. So we've set up pretty well. So what we're going to do is at the end of our turn, we're going to commit to a rest action, which we're going to take Morrigan and we're going to switch her with one of our other heroes. However, Mean has a forced ability here with the big red icon that says exhaust. When you declare a rest action, discard one ally tenacity card or discard this card. So we're going to discard a 0-cost Crescendo. I don't think we really need that, to make sure we don't have to discard this. We're going to switch Morrigan with Balthazar, because Balthazar, we have some 3-cost cards in our tenacity. Then we're going to... Actually, it would make more sense if we do Twyla next, because Twyla can make sure this mean song doesn't necessarily stay as mean to us as we want it to. We're going to draw 3, and beautiful. Perfect. Mr. and Mrs. Bonut will stay in play, and we'll take our next turn. For our second turn, we're going to assume that our opponent is going to do, let's say, 3 attacks. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the first attack to get a card in our hand and get a Cruel Summer. Then for the second attack, we can use Kneel for me to put one of these into our tenacity. I'm going to assume that the second attack is coming at Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont. Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont is a summon card, and they have an armor value of 2 because they have 2 cards attached to them. So to counter that, I'm going to play Kneel for me, which says place up to 2 cards you control into your tenacity. I'm going to place Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont, which is a card I control, into my tenacity. These cards attached to Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont are going to get discarded, and the Kneel for me, because it's a defense card, is going to go into our tenacity as well. And we're in a 3, but with Mean, it's -1 to cards in our tenacity, so we're actually still at 2, which is very, very good. This means our other cards in our hand still have a lot of value with them, and we also keep this alive. So for our third attack, excuse me, we are going to use Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont to parry the attack and not take an additional life. I think with the cards in our hand, we don't really need to make a lot of changes, because I think we're just going to play Cruel Summer and then go next and have Twyla activate her ability. So we don't need a 4th card in our hand to play something like Judgment. I don't think we want to do that, although we could. That's a very valid play because it gives us +1 armor for every time we have a tenacity total of 2 or less. But it has an ambush effect to play this card, so I know I'm going to go into Balthazar next, which means if I take a stamina, reveal it, and that'll trigger its ambush, I can have Balthazar play it for its affinity of -2 cost. So I'm planning a little bit further ahead, but I'm trying to hedge my bets, and I know that if I want to get more songs out early, it'll be much harder for my opponent to do something given I have Twyla out. So it'll come back to our turn, which a lot of that might not have made sense to you, but essentially we're playing the game. We're playing the game. Twyla can make it so we can exhaust our songs once per turn to exhaust their enhancements. And when our songs are exhausted, remember this ability, this forced ability, requires us to exhaust it. But if we can't exhaust it, we can't do that ability. So what we're going to do is we are going to start by spending 2, and we're going to play Cruel Summer. This says every enhancement enters play exhausted while this is ready. So right now it doesn't really do much for us, but on our opponent's next turn, it could potentially stop them from getting an enhancement or playing something. So when we make an attack, because our tenacity total is 2 or less, I'm going to exhaust one of our enhancements to exhaust one of their enhancements. And this will then allow Twyla to just hit for 4 and ideally mess up their turn a little bit. We'll activate, trigger, we'll take the rest action. We're going to take the rest action, and when we do that, Cruel Summer's force ability is going to activate, forcing us to exhaust it when we initiate a rest, and we are going to discard this face-up Kneel for me instead of discarding Cruel Summer. And because once again Mean is already exhausted, we can't activate its triggered or its forced ability. We're going to bring Twyla back, and then we're going to play Balthazar. We're going to then ready all the cards we have in play, and we're going to draw to our hand size, which is 5. Okay, let's see. So in our hand, we have nothing on our tenacity that will be helpful to us. Cruel Summer will make it so their card enhancements come into play exhausted, but that's not super relevant. However, we do have 2 defensive cards. However, Last Batchum requires us to have a 3 cost in our tenacity to actually make use of it. So really only You Hesitate is going to be our main way to prevent damage. So let's say our opponent is going to attack 2 times. And on these 2 attacks, we will for sure take the first one, reveal an Abomination, put it into our hand. Then we are going to play a You Hesitate, which is going to be a 0 cost prevent 1 damage, or prevent 2 damage instead if we have a tenacity total of 2 or less, which we do. This will go into our tenacity, and then it's going to come back to our turn. And for our turn, Balthazar is one of those guys that actually kind of needs his a weapon more than everybody else. So in this case, we are going to start by doing that. We're going to consume our Skeletal Servant, and we are going to play the rapier from our armory. And now that we have the rapier, we can discard 3 printed cost cards from our tenacity to get more attack, and we can use Balthazar's ability quite well here. So we want Balthazar allows us to play a 3 cost from our hand, or from our discard pile. So the judgment that we used earlier, we can actually play it now. We can free play it. So what we're going to do is we're going to activate Balthazar's ability. If we have a tenacity total of 2 or less, we are dealt 1 stamina card. Obligated to win. Then we get to free play up to 1 3-cost card from our discard pile. We're going to play Judgment, which gives us +1 armor while we have a tenacity total of 2 or less. So we're hedging our the weakest part of us, which is the defensive part. Then we can play something like Fang Breaker. So I'm going to spend 3 here, here. And we're going to deal 6 damage to an enemy, which is nuts. However, while this is in our tenacity, it's -3 cost. So we're going to deal 6, put it here. Then we can keep the Last Bastion, or we can keep the rapier and deal additional damage. This card is actually quite weak. On a basic attack, you can exhaust it to discard a printed 3-cost or more ally tenacity card, which would be Fang Breaker, because it's a printed 3-cost card. Oh, that's actually pretty good for us. So let's do that. But Last Bastion also looks at a printed 3-cost or more card. So let's assume that we are on the defensive and we're not going to use our rapier, but we still get the +1 attack from it. So we're going to swing for 1/2 +1 from our rapier. That's 3 damage. Remember, mean gives all of our cards in our tenacity -1 cost. So we're technically still at like negative values here, which is not good for defensive. So I think that's why we want to keep this Last Bastion in play. We're going to swing for 3, and then we're going to initiate a rest. When we do that, our Mean and Cruel Summers are going to activate, both forcing us to discard them or one of the cards in our tenacity. Our tenacity is 0, so we don't necessarily care about getting rid of these. We're going to get rid of a 0 and another 0. They're kind of just fodder for us to get rid of for our other effects, so that's okay. Now that we have everybody rested, or exhausted in our inactive hero slots, we get to ready everybody, and then we can put one out in front. I'm going to keep this card in my hand, this Last Bastion, but I'm going to go into Morrigan, and I'm going to draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. There we go. And we're going to add that to the 1 card we have, making it to the hand size of 7. Our opponent will then take their turn, and let's say they're going to attack us 3 times. Remember, Judgment is active now because we have a tenacity total of 2 or less, making us have +1 armor, so it's harder for our opponent to hit us. So let's say they're only doing not 3 attacks, but 2 attacks. One of their attacks, I think, we'll definitely let through to draw a card for Cruel Summer. Nice. We're not going to play it, but it's an additional resource. And then we can use Last Bastion, which will discard a printed 3-cost card, and then prevent 3 damage from an attack, which is pretty crazy. We'll come back to our turn, and we're at 1 in hand, and we can play a Skeletal Servant. I don't want to play another Judgment. Reclamation allows us to add a card from our discard pile to our hand. Maybe that's what we want to do. Let's do that. I'm going to spend 2 cards, and I'm going to play Reclamation. This is an enhancement that says exhaust, consume a card we control. I'm going to consume Cruel Summer. I don't want to pay for its cost anymore, and let's say our opponent is not playing as many enhancements as we wanted them to. Then we can add a card from our discard pile to our hand. I'm going to add, what do I want? I don't even know what I want. I guess an Obligated to Win? I want a 3-cost card. So I'm going to get Champion's Howl. Champion's Howl, I think, is a decent one, so I'm going to spend 1 Skeletal Servant, and then I'm going to spend some of these bigger cards, so I'm going to spend 3, and I'm going to play Champion's Howl. This is a 3-cost attack that deals 5 damage to our enemy, and if our tenacity total is 2 or less, which it is, any defense card played are consumed. So we get, boom, big ol' hit in, and get to put this into our tenacity, which is now more than 3. Oh, yeah, that's unfortunate. Oh, it's not, because we have Mean. It minuses 1 from our tenacity total, so -1, that's -1, and then this is 2. So this is really a tenacity total of 0. However, I've just realized Morrigan's ability forces us to consume a card. So if I exhaust, I consume a card, and then I can play a Skeletal Servant or another summon from my discard pile, but I don't have any cards left in my hand. So this is kind of awkward. I think what I would do is I would consume the mean, so that way I could play the Necro Staff onto Morgan. But I think this, I'm not gonna say late in the game, but getting another activation from Morgan is gonna be a little difficult given we're only at 1 stamina, and the staff only really works while it's in play and we have a summon. So it's a little awkward. I mean, it's only for this turn, but I do think that Morgan having to consume a card is maybe a little much. I don't know. So then we're going to initiate a rest, and then we're going to activate our mean, which says we have to discard a card, which will discard Last Bastion, or we discard mean, but we're not going to do that. Then we're going to switch Morgan out for Twyla, or excuse me, Balthazar. No, let's do Twyla, because then we get an additional... No, we want to do Balthazar, because we're going to draw 3 and we have to recycle our deck. I think this puts us into a pretty cruddy spot either way. The rules right now are if you have 0 stamina cards remaining and you have to recycle your deck, you are unable to recycle. You essentially can't. So by pulling Balthazar out right now, we can force the recycle a little bit early, and we'll have to unfortunately take a stamina card. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then +1 for the stamina card will be 6. We're allow our deck to be full for our last rotation of characters, and ideally be able to defend our life. However, if we put Twyla in, we only would have drawn 3 cards, which would not have recycled our deck. And then our opponent could have hit our life, and then when we had to recycle, we would have had 0 left. So we were kind of in a cruddy spot. And I see a lot of defense, so we kind of lucked out here. We could hesitate, prevent 2, we could kneel for me, we could put Reclamation and Mean into our Tenacity to use those to parry, and then we could potentially Last Bastion to Champion's Howl, and then during our turn, we could play something like... Oh, then we're left in a kind of a funky spot, because if we're dealt a stamina card, we will actually nuke ourselves. So on this turn, unfortunately, we have to just swing, discard this, for an additional damage, and then play something like a Reclamation, but that doesn't really do much. So this last turn's a little bit awkward. Given that we have a lot of defensive potential, I think we needed to just swing, and then go into Twyla for an extra 3 cards next turn, which would not have done much at all. So a little awkward. I think that cards like Reclamation and some of Morgan's kit feel just a little bit underpowered compared to the others. I think that Twyla's songs are quite strong. I think that some of the summons are also fine as is. They have their spots. And I think that Balthazar, the only thing that really needs to change is that I think his Rapier should probably have a different effect besides +1 attack. Something like defense cards are consumed or something like his other cards, just to kind of fit the vibe. But other than that, I think that these guys are pretty normal. They're pretty normal, and I think that the songs really make or break whether or not you can keep those going, and if you have enough 3-cost cards to make Balthazar even stronger. So I think they're fine. I think they're a little underpowered, especially compared to the other side of the bad guys, which are like a powerhouse of just like broken cards. So yeah. Thank you so much for watching. This was very insightful for myself, and I hope that wherever you are, whenever you are in the world, you have a great day, night, morning, weekend, work day, vacation, whatever it is, wherever it is, and I hope to see you in whatever the next video is. So, see ya.